I feel like that a lot of these people who would act this way don't have a problem with the fact that the woman they're attracted to is into other women. In fact, I think a lot of guys, a lot of straight guys, are somewhat turned on by that idea. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. You know, they don't have like the repulsive attitude toward it that they would have towards a lot of gay men. You know, I feel like with gay men, and I'm going back to my era now, you could be killed. For gay men were likely to get beat up, you know, if people found out they were gay, or killed. I mean, I'm thinking back to Matthew Shepard and such. And, you know, I think that there's a lot of incidents like that we've heard about. There's a lot that we haven't heard about. It just seems less common among lesbian women. It's like people have less of a hatred towards lesbians as they do towards gay men. K-lub's friend kind of speaks to that mentality, although I have suspicions about, or I should say your former friend. Are you still friends with this person?
Yes, I am, and I've had those same suspicions, I'll be honest, because I think that he doth protest too much.
Mm-hmm. There are many people who doth protest too much, you know, and you have to ask yourself why. So with what are we on? LG. So gay. We kind of talked about gay men a little bit. I think that as someone who largely identified as gay I'm lying. I identified as straight for most of my life. I was in the military for 20 years. So
you didn't have much choice about it then.
During Don't Ask, Don't Tell for the first half of my career. And so I was straight for all my youth and certainly my young adulthood because of that system, which is very disheartening for people who had to live under that and who were serving under that. You know, I don't think people realize just how difficult it was to be an LGBT service member in the United States under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and why it was such a big deal when it went away. Because, you know, my experience was totally, at that time, the military was very homophobic, you know, but it was allowed to be because you have LGBT service members, none of them allowed to be out open, you know, or engaging in whatever their normal lifestyle would be. But, you know, and everyone is aware of that's not the case. So the assumption is that anyone in the military at that time is straight, which gives you permission to only ever talk about straight things, to assume everyone else is straight, to make gay jokes, homophobic jokes all the time with no repercussions, you know, because the first person to complain about a homophobic joke, now the investigation is on them, you know. You know, why are you caring that someone made a gay joke? You know, is there something, you know, you're at risk for being outed even just by complaining, you know. And so you pretty much just have to bite your tongue and shut the fuck up. Frankly, you know, that's how bad it was. Not to mention the fact that, look, being in the military requires camaraderie a lot of times. You know, I was in the Air Force, so we had wingmen. You know, in the Army, you have battle buddies, but you have friends, your peers. They are often your fellow service members, and so you have to have some sort of rapport with them. You can't really just be the oddball, otherwise it's not really going to work out for you, you know. But the problem is, if you're gay in that environment, this is back in the day. It's not necessarily like this anymore, but at this time, you know, if the presumption is that everyone is straight and everyone around you is talking about women and trying to hook up with women, and that's just kind of the daily conversation. You know, this depends on your career field as well and where your work environment. If you're the one guy who's not talking about any of that stuff ever at any time, you're weird. You know, you're not with the group. There's something wrong with you, you know. And then people start asking and poking and prodding, trying to get you to, you know, talk about your sex life, because that's kind of a normal thing in the military. I didn't talk about it because what was I supposed to say?
Oh, okay. Well, what did you say when that came up? Were you just like, none of your damn business, or did you play along? Like, what was your game plan with that? Usually
I would just try to like change the conversation or distract, or, you know, think of some excuse. Like, I mean, there's a lot of times where I just wanted to say, you know what, guys, I'm into the dick, you know, but obviously that's not something you could say, you know. And so I would occasionally when I would, because I did, like I said, I am bi, and so I have, partake before I was married. I have been with women before, and I guess I could talk about those experiences, but they were few and far between, and there wasn't much to report. I wasn't having the sex life that some of these other people were because I was hindered by that. So it was just always kind of awkward. But I don't want to spend the whole time talking about the military. I do want to get into the bisexual aspect of it because I started going there, and then, as a bisexual person, I never could identify as bisexual either because that's still illegal, and at the time when I was in the military, not anymore. But speaking of the bisexual aspect, I find that being bisexual in the LGBT community is often more difficult and perceived more negatively by both the LGBT community and the heterosexual community. And I want to ask Borg what your thoughts are about that, and I'm willing to elaborate.
Yeah, I think I say I've never actually heard that before. I was always under the assumption that being bi in the LGBT community was a little bit easier. That was obviously just an assumption on my part, but
right.
I've never
a lot of people assume that.
Yeah.
A lot of people assume that. Do you guys know what bi erasure is?
No,
never heard of it.
Bi erasure is this phenomenon where people tend to deny someone else's bisexuality for a variety of reasons. Either they don't acknowledge the existence of bisexuals, or they think that we're just confused, or they think that we just are greedy and want everything, or they think that we're really just gay, but we don't want to say we're gay, or they think that, we just flip-flop back and forth. Basically, everything, they have all these different excuses for why we just can't be bisexual, because they're not willing to recognize that, this is especially true with bisexual men, because there's so many assumptions and stereotypes about men. You're either gay or you're straight. You can't be bi, That's, I grew up hearing this, and this is something I grew up hearing that from straight people predominantly. From people in the LGBT community, it's not that they don't recognize the existence of bisexuals. It's that they often resent the idea that we're attracted to both. Like, you can't be on both teams. You have to be one or the other.
Well,
I think it actually touches on
80-85.
Yeah, I think it actually touches on a point that I was wanting to make to when you were talking about the taboos around lesbian and gay. That comes from the straight community a lot, and I think this touches on it quite well. Is I always think of it because obviously I'm being asexual, so I sit on the outside of all of this. And when I look back in, all I see is basically I like to describe it as little boxes that society has engineered. An entire construct of little boxes that everyone has to fit into one of those boxes. Otherwise, you just don't fit in society, and that's all I see. And I think what you're describing there fits with that analogy quite well. You're either straight or you're gay. There's no, you can't sit on top of the boxes. You have to be in the boxes.
Yeah, pick one.
Yeah,
that's the attitude that people have. Like, it's a choice. It's again reducing sexual orientation back down to choice. Like, I'm just supposed to pick one and be satisfied with that. That's not how it works.
No, not at all.
Is there a gay gene? Is there like some heterogenetic thing that we inherit that makes us gay, or is it known?
We don't know. That is still being investigated. I will put it this way. We have not isolated a gay gene yet, but we also haven't isolated an alcoholism gene.
Yeah.
But we know that alcoholism is genetic. There's a genetic component to it. And we also have good reason to believe that there's a genetic component to sexual orientation. And the reason has to do with correlative statistics. Statistically, it's funny, I was talking to my mom about this earlier today. And the story is not important. The content of the story wasn't important. But before they continued, I was like, they're identical twins, aren't they? Without knowing anything about them. And she's like, yeah, how did you know? And I'm like, well, that makes sense because in studies of sexual orientation of twins, identical twins are much more likely to share sexual orientation than fraternal twins. You know, and this is if they're growing up in the same household or whatever. But that strongly suggests that there is a genetic component to it, and it's not just a matter of nurture and upbringing.